we're going to consider the reasons why we fall into sin and why we need not fall. And I'm sure this is going to be a very relevant study for all of you who are listening. We considered in our last study that grace could keep us from being mastered by sin. Man's greatest problem is that he's mastered by sin. And God has made a way through Jesus Christ, not only for the forgiveness of our sins, but for delivering us from sin's power. This is the good news of the gospel, really, that we can be delivered from the power of sin. You know, there's a difference between being forgiven and being saved. Many people wouldn't be able to explain the difference between the two. Let me use an illustration to explain it. If the people of the corporation are digging up the road in front of my house and they made a deep pit there, and if I have a little child who's in my home and I tell him, well, son, don't go near that pit because you may fall and you may hurt yourself. But you know how little children are. They don't pay attention to their parents. And say he goes near the pit and he falls into it. And from within the pit he cries out and saying, Daddy, Daddy, help me. And I hear that voice and I go running and I go there and say, son, what happened? He says, Daddy, I'm sorry. I disobeyed you and I've fallen here in this pit. And that pit's about, say, 8 feet deep. And I say, well, that's okay, son. I forgive you. Goodbye. And I leave him there and I go. Have I forgiven him for his disobedience? I certainly have. Have I saved him? No, I haven't. Do you understand the difference now between being forgiven and being saved? David said, bless the Lord, O my soul, who forgives all your iniquities. But David could not be saved from the power of sin. It was the same with every person in the Old Testament. But when we turn to the pages of the New Testament, in the very first page, we come to this verse in Matthew 1, verse 21. You shall call his name Jesus, because he shall save his people from their sins. Not just forgive their sins. He will save his people not in their sins, but from their sins. If the gospel message is only that Jesus can forgive me, but cannot save me, I would say it's good news, but it's not as good news as it should be. It would be like telling the woman caught in adultery in John's Gospel, chapter 8, you remember what Jesus told her? Has no man condemned you? Jesus asked her, and she said, no man, Lord. Well, Jesus said two things. He said, I don't condemn you. John 8:11. Now don't sin anymore. That's the twofold message of the gospel. I do not condemn you. Go and don't sin again. Now, if there was only one part to it, I don't condemn you. But, you may go and you may fall into sin again. You may again live in adultery. That wouldn't be very much of a gospel. But these two parts, the gospel message has got two sides to the coin. And if one side is missing, it's an incomplete gospel. People talk about the full gospel. Well, here it is. In John 8:11. I don't condemn you and don't sin again. Mercy and grace. Forgiveness and victory. They only had forgiveness under the law. Now we have forgiveness and victory. There will not be any mastery over our life of sin anymore. Now, if that be the case, does it mean that we will never sin again?